and the purpose. So I would say in general, the results were very positive, but it was something I wasn't quite expecting in such a public forum to have verbal pushback like that. I handled it, I think, well, but I think I could have done better. But that is an experience that I had just last weekend.
Okay. Yeah. So there's an experience where like these things can come up even within our sort of affinity groups, within people. We're generally on the same page with politically, but there can be a lot of infighting within and among the left. It'd be really frustrating. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry, I started belatedly recording the session. Oliver, as soon as I saw you pop in, that was a reminder. Sorry, I got a little bit of a late start on the recording.
I was just making sure things were going smoothly. It sounds like it
is.
is.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to share a story of a challenge? Catherine, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, my audio video setup here is not the greatest. So I am in Arizona, and one of the projects I'm working on with a fairly large group is trying to, a persuasion project. And I'm trying to train people, and I'm not being an expert myself, but in framing. How do you frame communication so that it can be heard and hopefully persuade? So do you have any tips on, what are some of the ways? I mean, I try to tell them, we need to start out with shared values. And I think that was, part of the prior discussion. But I would love to get more thoughts about
Sure. We'll try and get to that in the second half here. Great. Well, I think let's move on then to the next part here, which is if people want to share some success stories of like a difficult conversation that you felt, went reasonably well, and what did you say and why did it go well? I can share a couple if people don't have any, but I'd love to hear from other people too. Alex, yeah.
I've spent a year on Zoom and still can't ever find my button. Sure, I have my parents are fairly conservative politically. And a year ago we were having a conversation, which was actually more like an argument about privilege. And I think my mom, who came from a working class family, was feeling really attacked by the notion that where she was in her life now is something that wasn't earned. Because her father worked really hard and her mom worked really hard to raise her and my aunts when she was growing up. But I think that instead of escalating that argument and kind of arguing about like what privilege means and how it is something that is inherent because of, your race and your class and social status, I just asked her, why can't both things be true, that you both grew up with privilege and your family worked really hard to get where they are? Why do these things have to be in contradiction with each other? And why can't we hold both truths at the same time? And I think for her, like that, it wound up not being an escalated argument because I wasn't saying she was wrong. I was just saying that in addition to your truth, there's another layer of that. And I felt like that went better than some of our other conversations have gone.
And would you say, like, did you sort of steer clear of a lot of kind of like jargon and like anti-racist jargon and ideology, and just try and keep it more like at the relational level?
Yeah, for sure. Especially, it's helpful whenever it's both more difficult and also helpful to be in somebody's family. And I could say, Papa Ben, I could be very personable.
Yeah.
And I didn't bring up so much. I didn't use the phrase racism. I didn't use racist. And I
Mhm.
tried to not, it was like, it's difficult. You have to sort of do these like verbal gymnastics to not say, like, well, because you grew up white. And I think I might have pointed to some scenarios like, well, can you see how this might have gone a little bit differently if Papa Ben had been a Black man in the 1950s and
Mhm.
60s instead of a white man? So it was just like, I tried to make sure I did not call anyone racist or
Yeah.
label anything as racist.
Well, that's a great story. Congratulations. It sounds hard. And I want to call attention to another thing that it sounds like you did well, which is ask questions. And that's such a key principle. I talked about that last week, and it's a big part of my book. So if anyone wants to get kind of more skilled at figuring out how to ask non-defensive questions that are truly curious, and just bring out the person's story and open up and deepen the conversation. I invite you to check that out. I also have a lot of like free questions and materials on my website. Here, let me put that into chat right now. Second here. It's arranged by topics, and I think actually white privilege might even be one of the topics. So questions that you can ask. Yeah, I'll give another just real quick example, just because it's so short. It's kind of, it's a good one to tell because it's short, which is there's a guy I know who had been really not wanting to get vaccinated. And he was kind of sharing with me information that I'd probably pretty much put in the category of disinformation. So rather than getting into a war over like, that's disinformation and where'd you get that? And here's what the experts say and all this. I asked him, have you gotten your doctor's opinion yet on whether you should get vaccinated? And he's like, oh, no, yeah, no, I haven't. Maybe I should do that. And then I never brought it up again. And 2 weeks later, I saw him and he's like, hey, I'm vaccinated. I'm like, oh, what made you decide to get vaccinated? And he's like, well, I asked my doctor and she said she thought I should. I was like, well, God, why can't everything be that easy? So anyway, I think that kind of relates to Anthony's point about like, talk less, like how my go-to in the past so easily could have been like this massive lecture about vaccines, but I just asked a question and it was maybe a little bit of a miracle. We have time for maybe one more. If anyone has a real quick success story, it's okay if you don't. We could move on. The next thing Anthony had suggested we do is to brainstorm. And so this is kind of going to circle back around to Catherine wanting to kind of get more help, is like, what are the things that you as individuals or with the groups that you work with can do to hone your skills around communication, to practice, to have opportunities to talk to people across the divide? Because some people I know like are in bubbles and don't even know anyone with different views. So, and some people know maybe more people than they want to with different views, and that's a different kind of challenge. So kind of depending on where you're at, what are the different ways, and also in another category that we can brainstorm is what are the avenues for putting your opinion out there? So let's assume now, like you have some skill, you feel like you can state your point of view in a way that can be heard, that isn't, falling into all the pitfalls. Where and how can you do that other than just like in a one-on-one conversation with people? What are the things in your community that might become channels for either fostering dialogue or sharing your opinion? So we're going to just do this kind of brainstorm style, and I'll be taking notes of what people say. And then for the last couple minutes, we'll see if there were any that kind of seem like standout ideas that people want to pursue. This is a hard exercise, I think. So let me kick off by giving a few examples, and maybe that'll like get the juices flowing. So one example is you could get trained to host dialogues across lines of difference in your community. There's a couple models for doing it. Braver Angels is a group that has national chapters. But it's a national group where you're invited to set up a local chapter and they train you on how to host these dialogues. I've done a few of them. Fantastic group. Another group, because I think some of you might be from Kentucky, is Hands Across the Hills. Sorry, was someone trying to say something? Okay, Hands Across the Hills is just another, it's another dialogue initiative, but it specializes in dialogue between rural and either urban or suburban communities. And they actually have an upcoming training in Massachusetts where they want people to come and sort of become ambassadors and learn how to host these dialogues in their own communities. Actually, well, no, I'm not going to take the time to post that right now. Let me just, so those are the kinds of things if people have other ideas and resources.
So I had an idea that I wrote to you about.
Let's see,
And
Kenneth.
that this is Ken. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wrote to you about doing public radio shows where you invite the public to, and in my view, I'd be, hosting some music and this, that, and the other thing, but inviting people to talk about and engage in conversations using our guidelines for communication to bring that forth through music and community events, and also I want to attach it to the redistricting and communities of interest, which is important in redistricting our rural communities with each other and not getting sucked into this corporate Central Valley kinds of agriculture and business that those of us who live in rural communities are, we live here for a reason and for various reasons related to geology, and we have wildfire concerns in common. And there are a lot of community interests that we can, neighbors helping neighbors by doing prescribed burns, so that my reduction of fuels on my property helps my neighbor. And that can translate into masks and mask wearing, because that's healthy for them and healthy for me too. And, it can go on and on. And that's kind of where I'm working.
Well, great, thanks. And so just to bring it back around to your first kind of on the more concrete, were you saying like to try and get on a local radio show or produce like an original content local radio show?
Yeah, produce original content.
Mhm.
I choose music. There's lots of great sort of progressive music.
Okay.
And that book Rise Up Singing is great. And
Great.
anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Local radio. Love it. Others, Carrie.
Yeah, so I'm a precinct chair in my area, and my precinct that I cover is rural, and it was Obama, Trump. So what I've decided to do is I looked through some of the background research of my precinct, and I found we have actually some independent voters. We also have some Republican voters who are just dissatisfied with the current course, as well as Democratic voters. So I've set up a social get together in an outside picnic area in the center of my precinct at a park, and it's called A Penny for Your Thoughts. So we're going to get together with bring your own, casserole dish or, whatever you wish to do. And we have 3 structured, I've scheduled through the summer, 1 in each month, and then they have a successive theme. So first is a get to know yourself and each other and so on and so forth. The second focuses on review of some of the concerns that people brought up in the first. Then the third is how can we collaboratively work to solve these?
Great. And are you specifically focusing on independents or everyone in the precinct comes?
I have invited every single person in the precinct. I
Okay.
have the vote builder information, so I know who's voted for what. And everybody's welcome. Conservative, non-conservative, progressives, independents, doesn't matter.
Yep. Good
Everybody's invited.
good old fashioned local organizing.
Yeah.
Great. I will say, oh, you know what? I think Alexis had her hand up earlier. Did you still have an idea, Alexis?
Well, I kind of wanted to piggytail on, his radio idea, because I was thinking about doing something on television. I have about a 20-year background in journalism, which I have thrown out the window since I became an activist, because you can't be both legitimately for ethical reasons. So I've chosen to forego my formal career, but I am thinking about going back and doing a show. My main goal, I think I would like to do something where there is, the end result is sort of walking away with either a solution or at least a shared need, an agreement of some sort. But I'm trying to think about how to do that without it turning political, because I'm tired of that conversation. It needs to be had. I don't have to have it. It's being done all over the place. I would like to have or think about a concept where you invite different sects of people, or at least two, and with the goal being, everyone's goal going in is that we walk out of here agreeing on something. And so I'm going to be, kind of discussing with a few station producers if they'll let me do something on the weekends at 3 o'clock in the morning when no one's watching.
Yeah, that's cool. I would like to recommend that you check out something called deliberative democracy that this guy at Stanford, Jim Fishkin, has created. And it's a format for the kind of thing you're trying to do. And the only difference is like you could potentially be like recording and broadcasting rather than it just being a private, deliberative democracy session. So check that out.
Well, because I want people to see it. I want, the goal was not only to have the solution for everybody, but for people at home seeing division everywhere all day, maybe seeing that one of their neighbors on one side and another neighbor down the street actually got along for 2 seconds when typically they want to shoot each other.
Yeah, so it's like a collective problem solving show.
Even if we don't solve problems, an agreement finding show. You know what I mean? I feel like there's so many people, and I won't name names, Vladimir Putin, but some people want to divide us. And I would like to counter that. And instead of having every political battle and every policy battle and point by point and fact by disinformation battle, maybe we just stop that conversation and just go right to what can we agree on? Because there's so many things we agree on. When you're in line with somebody at the store, you'll find that you agree with them on something, no matter who they are. We'll get into a conversation and you will find something to agree on, because that's what we want to do as humans. So I think I would like to,
Yeah, great. We've got 3 minutes left. So are there other ideas?
I had a question. It seems like these ideas are sort of just centered on the notion that we should take people who think differently and like put them in the same room and either ask them to agree on something, even anything small, or maybe even talk about larger political issues directly. And I guess I'm kind of reflecting on that strategy, and I wonder if anyone knows, like, has that worked for them, hosting these dialogues that bring people together? Has it in the long term fostered, greater collaboration between people who think differently?
in my experience, what has actually, the thing that I've seen work the most is when two people go through a shared experience, which is kind of intense, almost like a trauma bond. And that's why reality shows work, when you send two people or a group of people out on okay, go forage the forest and find your way around the world together. And they can be, friends or complete enemies, but they will find a way to kind of work together. So I find that a trauma bond is a great way to get to know somebody, lock them in a room, you know, something like that. So I don't know that just dialogue, I've seen it work. But in an experiential situation, I think people do
Mhm.
look for successes there.
Yeah, and you know, the reason I mentioned deliberative democracy is because when I first was reading about it, they were giving examples of like huge public opinion shifts from the start of the session to the end of the session, just from, you know, everyone having a chance to like get all the same information and discuss it. And by the end of the day, like all of a sudden everyone wanted wind power, for example, in Texas was just one example. So I think it can be. Stephen, you had your hand up.
This may be too broad a point, but I'm aware that in experimental situations where you create tribal antagonisms between groups of people, artificially created, they become very real and very passionate and sometimes violent. What has been found in the social psychology literature, that what enables people to move past that is a common project. It almost doesn't matter what it is, but people immediately, soon feel like they're on the same side of the barricades when they are engaged in some, however trivial or consequential, some kind of common project. And I think about that a lot because I just moved to a pretty rural area in northeastern Oregon, and trying to think about what common projects there might be that would link people. And I think that seems like a first step in being able to talk about the hard stuff.
Mhm. Yes.
My
There is an
my
initiative-
go-to project is doing dog parks in our communities where people will bring their dogs, and that will give them a chance to find these commonalities of their pets and how they wag their tails. And it can be an amazing way to break through and have conversations with people you may never agree with. Anyway, I think that's a really great structural thing for our communities.
There's also a group called One America that does this kind of project-based stuff. It's faith-based, so I don't know if that works for you or not, but One America has that model. I think there are other groups out there trying to do that. Yeah, great. Okay, this room is gonna close on us in a few seconds. So thanks everyone for being here. This has been fun. And yeah, I'll see you back in the main room shortly.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay.